Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I am Baz Barrett. With me, as always, and in the flesh this time, is Mr. Trinity himself, Will Forrest. We're not showing this on our YouTube channel visually, just because, you know, the energy is just too much for the sensors to handle on YouTube. So we're doing audio-only version this time around. And you may have heard our Premier League Predictor a couple of weeks ago, available on YouTube and all our audio providers, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, Deezer, Harvey. Listen to our one last week to get that in joke, and if you do, put it on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. But when we did the Premier League Predictor, it's because it was International Week and we wanted to keep the Premier League action going, wanted to talk about what was going to happen for the rest of the season. Talked a little bit about Villa in there. You can go and check that one out. But at time of recording, it's a Premier League FA Cup weekend where Villa aren't involved, having a week off due to lesser other teams have a chance to win the FA Cup this year. So with the logic we applied last time, we thought, what would be better than during a game weekend where there's Premier League fixtures, where there's FA Cup fixtures, to talk about international football? We didn't talk about it during the international week, but we are jumping on that bandwagon a full, if I get my maths right, and I'm doing this live on air like a child with my fingers. So you got May, June, July, August, September, October, November, 7 months until the World Cup. We are getting on our bandwagon nice and early, getting the comfy cushions to get the height, and we are settling in because this episode of Talk of the Trinity podcast, we are going to make our hot take predictions for the England World Cup squad. So we can do this all again in October and have a look and see how much has stood the test of time ahead of the final selection of the World Cup squad, which we anticipate will be at the start of November, ahead of the tournament which starts for England on the opening day, where we are playing Iran for the first time in international football history, I believe, in terms of competitive games against Iran. Obviously don't play them in European qualification, nope. So paths don't cross. But we are picking 23-man squad. Yeah. I'm assuming we've both got some goalies, some defenders, some midfielders and attackers, although, hold judgment on that just yet. And we're picking the squad as if the World Cup was starting in April, who would we pick? Yeah. Or in terms of if we could freeze time now and transport it straight to the opening game, who would be in the squad as of now, playing that first game? Of course, there's going to be plenty of twists and turns along the way. Injuries, players coming into form, players coming out of form in October. So we will be, in our World Cup preview, maybe with a guest or two, deciding who will make that squad later on in the year, and also seeing how much of our opinions have changed and how much we can laugh at each other for some of these picks now. So, in terms of, before we get to the names, there's often a debate, and there certainly is with this England squad list or potential squad list, of do you pick players based on club form, or do you pick players based on international form, how well they fit with the international manager in the international system that particular country is playing? Or does it totally depend on the player and you've got to have different rules for different players? In terms of the makeup for your selection, how did you approach that particular question?
I picked as many English Villa players as I could.
Yep.
And then I put all the other names in a hat and pulled them out. And I threw in some names that I knew would make you laugh, some that would make you shake your head and question our friendship, and other ones that would make one of our good friends, who probably doesn't listen to this because he's a blue nose, Billy Loft, go, oh yeah, that's a good choice, when you know full well it's not a good choice.
So pretty much like every week,
yeah.
kind of this show.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the Villa players. We'll just have that hot take at the start. in your 23-man squad, how many Villa players you got?
I'm not telling you.
Oh, you're not?
I'm not telling you.
We're going in.
I'm
So,
not going to tell you.
So I will keep my Villa players close to my chest as well as close as the lion
like to
on the.
keep Danny Ings close to my chest.
Well, I think the saying is keep your friends closer, your enemies closer. Then you're gonna have to add a final part onto that sentence. So Danny Ings even closer to your enemies.
I tell you, yeah.
So it's like I don't. You know, I don't even know. Good job this isn't going past the sentences, because I don't know how we get it past that in terms of the visual representation of how close Danny Ings is to you right now. But we are going to start with the goalkeepers, and famous last words. This is probably going to be the least controversial out of the selection, the positions on the field. So in terms of goalies who you've got, and this may be a nice gentle toss-up to the question I asked in the intro in terms of do you go club form or international form? Who have you got your goalies?
Well, from looking at all the goalkeepers, really, who were credible options, and some that probably aren't so credible as well, to be honest with you, I've got about 6, and there was one of them who I thought, oh God, no. Though I think quite a few people would be saying, what? Really? There was another who was, yeah, no, you haven't played enough, but when you have played, you've done well. And then, yeah, it was a choice between 4 then, really. So, what do you want me to tell you the 3 that I've gone with, or do you want me to mention the 3 I haven't? Do you want to? How do you want to do it?
Well, go with the ones who didn't make the cut.
Okay, the ones who didn't make the cut were a player who only a year or two I'd have been saying potentially should be England's number 1, Nick Pope. I just hasn't made your 3. Well, I don't think he's had a good enough season for Burnley, really, when you consider how poorly Burnley are doing. So yeah, he didn't make it. Another person who I actually thought I played a lot more games than he has because of how well he did when he was playing, particularly in a Friday night away game against Brighton, and he was meant to be England's future a good 6 or 7 years ago. Jack Butland, he didn't make it. He's done quite well in the 6 matches.
Is he at Palace?
He played. Yeah, he's at Palace.
He's played about 2 games in about 4 years.
6 games for Palace this season he's played. He's just not getting in ahead of Guaita. And then the one who didn't make it, and I really, really wanted him to, because he has done well this season. He's managed to get himself back as number 1. Oh, actually, I could have picked the other person from this team, but I wouldn't have. And I think he's a very good goalkeeper. He's had it rough the last few seasons. Fraser Forster, I like him as a goalkeeper. I think he deserves more of a chance than he's got at Southampton. He's 100 times better than Alex McCarthy, without being horrible to Alex McCarthy.
Well, Forster's broke back into the team this season,
Yeah.
and he was on my kind of interesting backup list as well.
Yeah, you know, he did well against us at Villa Park. Considering they let 4 goals in, he still played quite well against us, I thought, and I was a bit worried when I saw that he was between the sticks. But also, I was glad for him. So those are 3 players who didn't make it for me.
Yeah, and I'll come back to Nick Pope because I got some good stats for you.
Okay.
About Nick Pope, and you'll probably see why I'm going to come back to you in a minute. But you've discarded those players from that final 3.
Yeah.
Who did make that cut for you?
Well, surprisingly, just Pippin Forster. And it's interesting because we said as is now and whatnot, but I've also thought a little bit about next season and things. And this person will not be at his club next season. And just for that alone, he should be rewarded. And that's Sam Johnston. No, I think Sam Johnston is going to join the team next year in the Premier League. He'll be the number 1 there. And he'll play well. And he's a good goalkeeper, you know. I think he deserves to be at a much better club than West Brom. It's a shame that no one took a gamble on him this year. I could see him as Everton's goalkeeper next season.
I think some things would need to happen for that.
Yeah, and I don't think Jordan Pickford will be Everton goalkeeper next year. I think he'll move on. One, because he's not the greatest Everton goalkeeper, but when he plays for England, he's absolutely fantastic. Both of those are on my plane, going to Qatar. And then the last one, who I surprised myself, would probably be my first choice based upon this season, Aaron Ramsdale. I think he's done very well for your Arsenal since he's joined them, considering the last 2 years he's got relegated. Just bought another player, Dean Henderson, but he's not playing enough.
Nope.
So yeah, Pickford, Ramsdale and Johnston make it for me.
Pickford, I think it's fair to say, is one of the players who sums up the debate between do you pick players based purely on club form or do you pick players based on international performances if they're playing regularly enough for their club side. Pickford really hasn't put a glove wrong for England in terms of when he's been first choice. I remember before the last World Cup, there was a bit of a feeling of, we're a bit short kind of in goal here. But then stepped up international level Colombia, really quite for a few players. That's the game that will define them. And, you know, he's the one who has to take a great deal of the credit for winning that penalty shootout. And best goal in the tournament, Euro 2020, in my view. I mean, he made 2 saves in the penalty shootout, which ordinarily you save 2, you expect to win.
Well, you know, he was very intelligent with the Jorginho penalty because nobody saves those ones, really, do they? Considering he does the same thing for everyone. I think maybe Donnarumma was a better goalkeeper in the tournament, but apart from that, Pickford only let 2 goals in. One was an absolutely fantastic free kick, and the one in the final was a goal that we probably don't want to talk. It was Villa defending, wasn't it, when Bonucci bopped that one in. Yeah. But at least we won't have to worry about Italy this time.
Yeah, thank you to the good folks of North Macedonia, who even had the grace to not qualify themselves, so there's not the opportunity for them to do the same to us, kind of in the group stage. So, yep. 8 years potentially between World Cups for Italy. Didn't qualify 2018. So that is...
Load of rubbish.
What a shame.
Well, most of their players playing to their 50s, so it won't matter anyway, will it?
Yeah, that is true. They will be back. Jorginho will still be having the run-up for that penalty. But you mentioned Ramsdale. He's in my top 3 selection. I mean, I made some quite disparaging comments when they signed Ramsdale, Arsenal. I mean, I thought in terms of that shows where Arsenal were in terms of spending that much money kind of on. I would have said a fairly... I would say an average goalie, to be honest. But he's had a good season. You can't argue with that. I'd say in terms of form, arguably quality, he's in the top 3 in terms of English goalies now. So he makes a play for me. Pickford, just to confirm, he makes a play for me. I think you can't. And unless he's injured, 1, I think he should play. And 2, he will be playing. Southgate, he's one of those players... Pickford, who is not getting drops from this team. Though we're picking who we would pick, but we'll, I think, acknowledge that even if we were saying Pickford isn't fit to lace Tom Heaton's shoelaces, that Pickford is still in this squad. Both got Ramsdale. In terms of Johnston, I agree with you that if he was playing in the Premier League, or if he was having an absolute blinder in the Championship, then maybe he could get that 3rd place, but he's doing okay at West Brom this season, and at that Championship level, okay isn't good enough really to get yourself in the England squad. But I mean, it was a shame that we weren't able to sign him due to financial irregularities at the time, because I like him as a goalie, and I hope that he does actually get a move to the Premier League in the summer, hopefully not via promotion with West Brom, which I'll let you laugh at this, doesn't look like it's going to happen in terms of this season. But my 3rd choice, and I alluded to it earlier, is Nick Pope, because you have a look in terms of the expectation would be a team in the relegation zone, which Burnley are at time of recording. The defence must be terrible, is generally the assumption. Norwich are bottom, 63 goals conceded, pretty terrible. Watford are 19th. see which one of us predicted them to be in the bottom three by going to have a look at our Predictor, Premier League Predictor episode we put up a couple of weeks ago. But they've conceded 60. Yeah. You've got Everton in 17th, 52. Leeds 68. Newcastle 54. Southampton 52. Brentford 48. Villa 46. Leicester 48. Burnley have only conceded 44 this season. And it's not always as simple as if you concede loads of goals, you shit. If you've got not very many goals conceded, you're a brilliant goalkeeper, because it could be in terms of you've got a fantastic defence in front of you. But I think he's had a decent season. I mean, in terms of, there was that season, I think it was before Euro 2020 when it happened, he would have made the squad, you think, if he wasn't injured.
Yeah.
I think this time around, if he's not injured, I think he makes the squad. I mean, I'd say in terms of, the only potential issue I can see is what we just talked about there. If Johnston gets a run in terms of in the Premier League, because there's a feeling in terms of your first choice is going to be your first choice unless there's issues, shall we say, during the World Cup. So you've got to have your first two in terms of match ready. Your third, if you take the view of, doesn't really matter who your third choice is in terms of, do you take somebody younger for the experience? I mean, Pope hasn't got a lot of experience, but you might say it might be better for Johnson's development maybe. And if he's playing well in the Premier League, I mean, you could see a scenario if Burnley go down. Again, have a listen to our Premier League predictor to see if we predicted that. If they're in the Championship and Johnson's in the Premier League, you've just switched one we were talking about earlier, maybe. So, I don't think it's a lock in terms of that pick. But yeah, based on the criteria, picking it today, I'd have Pope.
I wouldn't be shocked though, if come talking closer to the World Cup, if Henderson gets a move away and he's playing regularly for Man United, I wouldn't be surprised if he was in the three. I think out of all the goalkeepers we said, potential-wise, he's got the most potential to be the best goalkeeper out of the lot of them.
Yep.
The thing with Pope and Johnston, both of them really, is that if they were as good as we're saying they are, wouldn't one of the top teams or a big Premier League team come in for one of them and sign it by now? I mean, Johnston will leave West Brom at the end of the season, but that's by default because he's a free signing. He might go somewhere and be a number two. I really hope he doesn't. He may go and join a newly promoted team. I really hope he doesn't do that either. I want him to go and join a team like an Everton, if they get rid of Pickford, or Newcastle, where he will be their number one.
Yeah, I mean, you look in terms of, would you get a move to a big team or even those goalies? Running through the top teams in the Premier League, Man City, Edison, you can't really see anybody getting ahead of him. Liverpool, Alisson, probably not. Chelsea, Mendy.
But a West Ham, Leicester type of team who are pushing on. And you think about Tottenham with Lloris, who he had a blinder in his last game, but hasn't been on the same sort of form. He's getting 36 nearly, coming in to replace one of them.
I think realistically, in terms of available jobs, and they got decent goalies. We mentioned West Ham, Leicester, Palace, if they're still doing okay. Newcastle, you mentioned. But I mentioned in terms of they're not team challenging for the league, so it's difficult in terms of to get yourself that big, like to a real big club at the moment, which is probably why, funnily enough, in terms of why England's number one is for a goalie playing for a team who've been, to use a technical phrase, bobbins this season. So you get yourself established in the Premier League, then you got a half a shot. And I think the summer transfers will be interesting to see kind of the moving around in that order of the third choice, because I agree with you, there could be some change there. Moving the bandwagon on to defensive selections, I'll open up this time around. In terms of number of defenders, I've got 9.
Yeah, I've got 8.
It's always the traditional, well, I say the traditional, when I play Football Manager, 2 in every position and then 1 spare. Just so you can...
I always went for a spare midfielder.
I mean, it certainly the midfielder is going to be, I sense that is going to be a real not going to say contentious point. I'm going to say it's going to be a lively debate in terms of midfield. But for defence, and again, this is based on... It's mainly who I'd pick, but some inevitably is going to be some crossover in terms of who Southgate would pick, because part of the reasons are because they've been playing for England for a while, and been playing for England for a while because Southgate picked them. So there is a little bit of tinges. But I'll go in terms of my centre-backs to begin with. Maguire, Stones, Mings and Tomori. In terms of my full-backs, I mean, if this was Southgate, I would have picked like 23 right-backs and then my reserve 3 players as right-backs. But in terms of players who you'd say were the right-backs, I've got like, technically 3 can play at right-back, but I'm picking one kind of in my dual kind of role potentially. I've got Kyle Walker, Alexander-Arnold and Reece James.
Yep.
And then I've got 2 left-backs, Luke Shaw and Ben Chilwell. So out of those, so you've only gone for 8 defenders. So in theory, there should be a higher number that we've agreed on. I'm going to...
In theory.
Yeah, in theory. How many of those have made your list?
2.
That high?
No. 6.
Okay, that's
6 of them have.
That's not too bad. That's not too bad.
And they're going to be potential shockers for you. So who was there that was close for your consideration that you didn't quite pick?
I think in terms of... It really... Who could be 4th centre-back? I think you could have had 3 others. You'll consider like Guéhi. Oh, apologies if that is not the correct pronunciation. Crystal Palace centre-back who made his debut recently for England. Just a bit too late, perhaps. Ben White. Mm-hmm. I think he's done okay for Arsenal, but I think he's a system player, and yeah, I'm not convinced I want to unleash Ben White against anybody good in the World Cup. I mean, we've got many friends of the show, Brighton fans, and they've told us he was, kind of, if they were saying that he's kind of been propped up by Adam Webster, Lewis Dunk in terms of centre back, I'm not. Yeah, that leaves it a bit for me. Connor Cody's been in the squad, but in terms of, I got nothing against Connor Cody. Decent player for Wolves, had a decent career, having started as a youth player at Liverpool. I've heard a lot of things saying, he's good for the squad, good for morale. It's like, that's good. I mean, you don't want somebody who's terrible, but it's a World Cup. It's like you want players who you think are going to contribute
Waste
on the
space.
pitch. Yeah, if they need them in. So, in terms of the centre-backs, those were ones I considered. Walker Peters I thought about in terms of kind of filling in a role on either flank potentially. Kieran Trippier I thought about because he's got international experience at the highest level.
Done well at Newcastle since joining them. Before injury, scored 2 goals for them.
Yeah, so he would be, in terms of fullbacks, probably up there in terms of playing for that kind of dual role. You got Mitchell at Palace. I think he's one to keep an eye on. Whether I'd have him in the World Cup, probably not. Well, as evidenced by the fact I just picked my first squad and he's not. But those were some of the names that I was kind of thinking about, potentially maybe in the conversation later on in the year. Were there any others who you've been contemplating at the bubbling under stage?
I've just written down a load of names of English players, to be honest with you. Most of those you've said, the only ones who I think potentially, there's 2 fullbacks that you haven't mentioned that I'll just say that if that could potentially have got into a squad based upon form, if they'd have played a lot of the season, and depending on how we're doing. Matt Targett hasn't done too badly at Newcastle, and if he carries on playing well there, could he squeeze in as a left back? He's not as good as the other 2, so I don't think he would. Tariq Lamptey, I just don't think he's quite on the ability of Alexander-Arnold and James yet. However, or Walker. However, he likes right backs, so you never know.
Good shout.
Centre back wise, if depending on how Newcastle do next year, and he can play in a back three, you've got Dan Burn, potentially. And if this person can do well again for his club or joins a new one, he got into those provisional squads last year for England. Ben Godfrey, he hasn't had the greatest season, but he's versatile across the back four, rapid as well. So potential. And the other one, Max Kilman, had a good season at Wolves.
He's all right, yeah.
So I think he's got to be in contention. But I'll hit you with my 8 players now. Connor Cody, I agree, doesn't make the squad. Ben White doesn't make the squad. He was only changed this morning. Kyle Walker doesn't make my squad because I don't think we need a load of right backs. So yes, he can play centre back as well, but I think we've got other right backs who can also play at centre back. And I actually didn't go for, and I can't actually believe I'm saying this, but I didn't go for him. I didn't go for Luke Shaw. I didn't put Luke Shaw in.
Okay,
I think there's
bold call.
I think there's 2 other left backs who have played very well this season that I'd go for. I also didn't go for Harry Maguire because I don't think that just because you do well for England you should be picked every single time. I think it's got to come down to club form as well. So I'm going to be that England manager who looks at club form.
Yep.
So my 2 right backs, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Reece James. Reece James has played at centre-back as well. He can move into midfield, so he could slot into the back three, which is why Kyle Walker didn't get in.
Okay.
Kyle Walker, though, is one of my reserve 3. Chilwell and Kyle Walker-Peters are my 2 left-backs. Kyle Walker-Peters has played on that left side a lot for Southampton. I think he's done very well this season. He got into the last England squad.
Yep.
So I'll give him that opportunity. It's a big call, maybe it's a controversial one because Shaw's done well also.
So would you be saying first game against Iran tomorrow, you're playing Chilwell at left back?
Yeah, providing he's not injured, obviously, but yeah, Chilwell's there.
When you're throwing the tactics board in the dressing room, he gets some chalk in the eye.
Yeah, no, it's him. And then my 4 centre-backs, 3 of them, as you've worked out, are the same. John Stones, I think on his day, is a Rolls Royce of a defender. He needs to be concentrating and playing against the best teams, and he didn't let us down in the last Euros. He was great. I've got Tyrone Mings as well. Danny Murphy hit the nail on the head with him the other day in some ways and said he has to play against really good players to really concentrate because his performance goes up then. All right, maybe it didn't go to plan against Spurs, but we can blame Esri Concert for that. Tamori played 27 out of 32 games for table-topping AC Milan.
Yep.
We spoke about how Everton fans had mentioned him going there in the summer, but if you're playing for top of the league, AC Milan, you're going to be demanding a high-placed Premier League team if you are to move. The other one, a player who's played quite a high number of games this season in a back three, is a player that Gareth Southgate likes, though hasn't made squads recently, though I wouldn't be surprised to see him get in. Knows how to take a penalty as well. Eric Dier. Now, I don't think Eric Dier is one of the greatest centre-backs ever, but he's a player who will put his body on the line. He encompasses everything that you want as in an Englishman playing and representing the national team. There's been lots of videos on Twitter of how his challenge on Sergio Ramos in that famous win in Spain, pretty much from a goal kick, was akin to Matty Cash on Matt Doherty at the weekend. Don't see it myself, really. No. But I think he's one of those players as well who's a bit of a leader, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the squad. He can carry the ball, he can play a pass as well. I think he gets a bit of bad press like Maguire does, but I'd have Dier in over Maguire.
In terms of Dier, what I would say is that old club v international debate, Dier was having his longest run in the England team, probably when he wasn't playing massively well for Spurs. He's actually probably playing the best he's played for Spurs for a good few years this season, and he's probably the furthest away from the England squad that he's been for quite a while. So, kind of a wild card that isn't a wild card. Yeah, I can see for you. I could see Dier. Yeah, so that's not when you sit down and ruminate about that one, I don't think that's the most outlandish shout.
Versatile as well. He can move up into that holding midfield role, and if you play 4 at the back, a 4-3-3, which I don't think Southgate will play, but if he did and he had him as the holding midfielder, he drops into the defence so that the wing backs can push on. He did that brilliantly at Spurs under Pochettino.
Yep. And it'd be interesting to see in terms of obviously Conte beginning to get his ideas over at Spurs now, if that continues into next season and Spurs start next season very well, whether with Dier, if he is still in the team at centre-back, whether that gets him a late run up to the World Cup squad. In terms of Maguire, I think he is the player who probably sums up perfectly the question we posed at the outset of, do you go for club form or do you go for international form? Taking them kind of in their extremes, if you go on club form alone and that's all you go for, he's nowhere near the squad in terms of club form.
Yeah.
Right now, he's had a pretty dreadful season for Man United in terms of where Man United expect him and the club to be. So if you're going purely on that, you wouldn't pick him. If you're going purely on international form, you do pick him because I think hasn't let England down. I think in terms of the Euro 2020, World Cup 2018, England going deep in the tournament. Maguire was at the centre of that, quite literally. So if you're going purely international form, you pick him. I mean, in terms of putting our Southgate hat on, he obviously rates him, obviously likes him. It's going to shield him from the worst of the criticism, some of which, I mean, in terms of during the last international break, international games going on, Harry Maguire getting booed by England fans. You don't boo England players at the start of a game. I mean, I think that's just stupid. I mean, in terms of somebody's had an absolute nightmare at the end, whether you believe in booing or not, that's a situation where you can maybe kind of take both sides of the debate, but booing somebody from kick-off, that's pretty stupid in my view. But things aren't as clear-cut as that, and you got to, where it comes in, how much does club form have to really be at the top before you say that's going to affect whether you pick somebody internationally? That's a sliding scale, and that's always kind of that gamble, because somebody in terrible club form, can you trust them to put it in international form? He hasn't so far looked out of place in England, but I mean, in terms of that's going to be the debate I think there's going to go into next season. But for me, if the tournament's tomorrow, I'll play him, just because I think that international experience, I think, will see him through. I mean, Stones, obviously, he hasn't had as bad a season at Man City. That's because he hasn't been playing. I mean, in terms of as much of the season, struggled to get in the team at the start of the season. I mean, he's had a few more games recently, but I think Stones is a less extreme example of that sliding scale, as in he played decent for England. He hasn't played as bad for Man City as Maguire, so you get them both kind of in the middle, and that's where he's a safer pick.
I think Maguire needs to leave Man United to get the England fans back on side and go and play for somebody who aren't a nationally hated club. Man United are hated by most fans. I
would say now United are seen as more of a joke.
But I think when they come out and they're going, oh, look, we've got Ronaldo and we've got Sancho and we've got this and now we're going to win the league and that, and you've got Ferdinand going, this is how it's going to end up, Liverpool are miles behind us. Yeah, it is a joke, but at the same time, I think that people still see Man United and think, you big-headed idiots, you're not the bully you were, you're Biff from Back to the Future. You're not there with Marty McFly knocking him about in the corridors anymore. You're 50, getting out the back of, your manure company van type of a thing. Maguire did very well in the last international tournament. I thought he did better at the World Cup before. I also felt it was very unfair on Tyrone Mings that he got dropped when he did last time. I can understand it from a world-class point of view. Maguire is, on paper, a better defender than Tyrone Mings, though. Yeah, for me at the moment, I think the best thing Maguire can do is leave Man United, go and join someone not as high profile at the moment, get his career back on track and get back into the England squad that way, even though he will be in the England squad because Gareth Southgate loves him.
Where would you say would be a good place? West Ham again?
Yeah, that sort of a team. I think someone who...
We're building a great team for West Ham.
Yeah, right. Someone who aren't, expected to challenge for the title, who aren't expected to challenge for the top 2 or top 3 even, a top 4 sort of team. I don't think Arsenal would suit him. Tottenham, but then Dier moves on. Dier comes to the Villa. Going back to Leicester. He'd be good there. West Ham type of a team. Yeah, I don't think Newcastle. I think they're going to be high profile. Southampton. I don't think he moves down as low as that. Maybe he goes and does what Tomori did and goes abroad and plays abroad somewhere in the Italian league where, we slower paced and whatnot, and there is more emphasis on defence, and go and show how good he could be for a Juventus or one of the Milan teams.
Yeah, that would be an interesting development for Maguire at his stage of his career, going over to Italy. I mean, in terms of just quickly running through some of the other points in terms of our differences of selection, Luke Shaw for me, I think he's first choice currently in terms of left back. I mean, I say in terms of Walker, I picked it in, you mentioned in terms of other players can cover at centre. I agree. Where I put Walker over the edge is because he's done it at an international tournament.
Yeah.
Rovers haven't. But yeah, I mean, I think we've both got Alexander-Arnold in our squads because based on ability alone, I think he's definitely one of the best English players. Southgate doesn't appear to agree with us in terms of another kind of the flip side. We talk about Maguire. He's in the team because Southgate likes him for his system. Alexander-Arnold struggles to get in the squad sometimes because Southgate doesn't like him for his system.
I'd have Reece James ahead of him as right back or right wing back. I think Reece James has been very, very consistent. He's added a lot of goals to his games this season. You look at the Newcastle away game where he got 2. He knows how to hit a thunderbolt. Trent Alexander-Arnold can put a ball onto a sixpence though, and he's a great free kick taker. It'd be interesting to see if you can get them both into the team. Maybe one at right centre back, one at right wing back, or one in the holding midfield position. I know they tried Trent there before and it didn't quite go to plan.
No.
But Reece James has played centre midfield for Chelsea before, whereas Alexander-Arnold, as far as I'm aware, hasn't done that for Liverpool, or maybe not as much. So why not put Reece James there,
Yep, I mean, he's made the cut for both our squads.
Yeah, man.
And speaking of centre midfield, let's move the selection on closer towards the opposition's goal and talk about our midfield. I mean, there's going to be debate about what counts as midfield, what counts as attackers. In terms of, we've gone for attackers as being kind of the number 9, type role, so kind of...
Striker.
Yeah, so centre forward. So from that perspective, our midfielders are quite top-heavy in terms of numbers. Mm-hmm. I mean, some in terms of you playing kind of 3 kind of up front, you might say the 2 on the wings are attacking players. We've put them in midfield, I think, based on what we were talking about before we went on air. So in terms of your midfield, and we've talked about some players who haven't made the cut for goalie, defence, and I think kind of most of the players we kind of thought, yeah, kind of may probably agree there for most of them, apart from the ones we particularly discussed. I think midfield is the area whereby there's going to be a lot of debate going into this tournament in terms of who makes the cut and who doesn't, and all kind of how far does international form experience go in. So in terms of players who haven't made your midfield, who are some of the ones who you think are going to be causing the consternation amongst the listeners?
I've gone for 9 midfielders. 2 of the more attacking winger type midfielders who haven't made it, the Manchester United pairing of Sancho and Rashford, because I don't think they've had good enough seasons. Sancho's starting to pick up a little bit of form recently, but he hasn't done enough. I've gone for one of the Arsenal attackers and the other one hasn't made it, but I'll come back onto that a little bit more in a minute and as to why. 3 central midfielders who I considered but didn't make it. James Madison didn't. I don't think he's had a greater season as he would have hoped. He's done well in flashes. He's been working on playing as number 8 and getting to the box more from his interviews. He's probably got more chance of going over there as a commentator because people like to think that he's quite sensible. I think Jordan Henderson doesn't make it for the same reasons as Connor Cody. You know, you don't always need someone who's good for the squad there. He's played all right for Liverpool. You know, he's still thereabouts, captaining them and whatnot. But I think there's better central midfielders for us. And the other player who doesn't make it, though he's had a decent season for his team and he tends to do well, but I just think there's better options than him. Mason Mount doesn't make it for me. So I've got 4 midfielders then who were sort of on the cusp.
Yep.
And I'll give those to you. 2 of them I think you're going to go, mate, what? James Ward-Prowse doesn't. I think he's too much of a... I think he's seen too much of a dead ball specialist to make it, and that means that you've got to bring him on at a point to take a corner or a free kick, and then you've got to leave him on the pitch. It's not the NFL. You can't just bring him on to take the kick and then take him off.
Or if you bring him on in the 120th minute before a penalty shootout.
Well, yeah, I don't think we'll be doing that. A player who has been lighting up the Premier League this season, but I think it's potentially just a little bit too soon for him, but expect to see him in future England squads. Our very own JJ Ramsey. Yep. He's my first choice backup on there, sat next to Kyle Walker going, yep. Oh, you know, I don't want anyone to get injured, but here's hoping.
Let's go and kick some people.
Yeah.
Training.
2 other players, bit out there, okay, who were close. Callum Hudson-Odoi was one. He's done all right for Chelsea this season when he's been playing, both in a wing-back role and in an attacking midfield role. Pulls players out of position. He's got pace. He can score a goal. He can set them up. He's one of those players, though, who you feel maybe does need a move as well. Go and join someone like Bayern or Dortmund who have been linked with him before and you'll get more chances, you know, and go and light up the Bundesliga. Another player who I really wouldn't be surprised to see as that wild card, either him or Ramsey, if he can play more games. And he's one of the reasons why I think we're going to start potentially seeing the decline of Jordan Henderson. Harvey Elliott,
yep.
He had a great season for Blackburn last year. Very unfortunate to pick up that injury that he did. I think you start to see more of him. Will he be a centre mid or an attacking mid? Who knows? But he's the third person in my little section at the back of the plane for the 3 of them. Walker, JJ and Elliott sat next to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in terms of the players who you discarded straight away, guess who style, I'd say we largely agree. I mean, in terms of Sancho, Rashford, yeah, I don't have them in my squad either, as of today. I haven't been playing well enough. Rashford, yeah, I mean, his season appears to be getting worse and worse, which is unfortunate. Sancho, as you say, his season's been getting a bit better. I'd say in terms of, out of the 2 of them, Sancho's closer to the plane.
Rashford needs to leave Man United as well. I think he needs a resetting somewhere else.
I'd have him at Villa.
Yeah, well, so right, to be fair.
Rashford. Henderson, yeah, I mean, I think his time's gone. I mean, we talk about international experience with some of the other players earlier as to why you get them into the squad, because they're going to probably be first choice because of, well, based on international experience. Henderson's not first choice, hasn't been first choice for England for a while. He's not first choice for Liverpool.
No.
I don't. As I said, I think we've got enough other players who are kind of there and thereabouts not to. I don't want to say waste of space because, you know, he has achieved a lot in his career and for England, but I think it'd be a backward move in terms of having Henderson or two in 2021 when we're going to be in 2022. So, I mean, it's nice for him. He came on a quarter-final against Ukraine, got a goal, his first England goal. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, I think it's time to move on to some of our other options. Ramsey, I agree with you in terms of not quite there in the squad, but, you know, you'd like to think in the next 12 to 18 months he'll be in a squad, he'll get a cap or 2. Yeah. You'd think, and he's developing in the way you'd want him to, and hopefully at Villa for many years to come. I agree with you, Ward-Prowse, in terms of you can't take somebody just because they got a good set piece. In terms of you've got to be good enough to justify yourself playing for the other 85 minutes where there isn't a corner or a penalty or whatever else. And he's decent, not a terrible player, obviously. I mean,
can play right back though.
He can, but so can the other 22 players in Southgate's squad. So, yeah, Ward-Prowse, he's close for me, but not close enough. In terms of my last player who wasn't my first backup, and this is either going to lead you nicely into your Arsenal debate when we're talking to who we did pick. I've got Smith Rowe in terms of my backup. I mean, he's done decently for Arsenal.
He's had a good season.
But he's not... It worries me in terms of picking an England squad if he's not first choice for Arsenal. If he was playing every week, then okay, yeah, maybe a bit closer. But it's not quite established himself in the Arsenal team. I mean, he's a young player. Maybe you don't want to play him every week. That's fine. That's a reason. But I just think there's other players who are a bit more established who go there ahead of me. And Madison, I agree with you in terms of, I don't think he makes the England squad. In terms of he's playing, as of today, first half of the season wasn't much good. He's getting better second half of the season, but there's others who are ahead of him. The player who I kind of and ahed about, and I think from what you were saying, I think we probably had these two players on either side of the line in terms of last in, first out, in terms of selection. But I've got Conor Gallagher as my kind of first backup. And the player, I'll give you a spoiler in terms of my midfield selection. I and ahed between him and Mason Mount for my place. And it was close. I just thought Mount can play in a few more positions than Gallagher, maybe higher up the pitch. That's why I went for Mount. But I think in terms of when we do this exercise again nearer the World Cup, I don't think Mount's place in the squad is kind of secure. I think he's in that, you probably put a bracket of at least 6.
I don't know, Southgate's a bit of a fanboy for him.
In that sense, yeah. I mean, yeah, if we're looking at a Southgate pick, then yeah, because he runs about and works hard and listens, then obviously you want that kind of in terms of a player international level when you haven't got as much time to get over your tactical opinions as you do at club level. But kind of from if you're just looking kind of on our personal viewpoint, I think they're kind of the closest to that cusp of being picked or not. And I'll dip my toe in the water then in terms of, I've mentioned one player I have picked, Mason Mount. He's close for me. In terms of the other midfielders I've gone for, Calvin Phillips.
Yeah.
Saka
is the one with Smith Rowe. It was between those two, but because of, and I really liked Smith Rowe. I didn't think much of him really when he was on loan at Huddersfield. Came back to Arsenal, did very well there. Would have been a great signing for the Villa if that had been true in the summer. Saka though's got that versatility. He can play a number of positions, and he's in a good run of form at the moment. So yeah, I went with Saka as well, and Calvin Phillips, as you say.
Foden.
Yeah.
Grealish.
Without question, he's the most talented English player that we have got. I think he needs to be our main weapon, but he needs to play like he did for the Villa. He
does, kind of. Funnily enough, in terms of City, there's kind of talk about you wouldn't be able to play in the way you did, again, as you did at Villa. And he appears to have almost subconsciously gone, okay, yeah, I need to play differently. Whereas, funnily enough, I think for City, you could probably do with playing a bit more in the way he used to play for Villa, especially with their false nine, in terms of you want that bit more unpredictability from kind of your front three. So, he should get back into the Villa spirit. Bellingham.
Without question.
Raheem Sterling.
Without question.
And we've talked about him previously off air, and you could arguably say that he's maybe one of the first names on the team sheet now. Declan Rice.
First name on mine.
There we go. 1 down, 22 to go. So they're by my mathematics, 8.
Yeah, so, I'll just quickly run through why. Declan Rice is my New England captain. I'll give him the armband. He's had a fantastic season for West Ham. He's developed his game into so much more than just being a DM. He was our best player in that European final last year before he got subbed off.
Yep.
I think he's the first name on the team sheet because he's the captain. Alongside him, because I'd go for a two-man midfield, for the fact that how much he's played and the experience he's had playing at the top end of the league and also in big European competition, Jude Bellingham sits alongside him. Calvin Phillips is in my squad because of his importance to England. His importance to Leeds as well. Yep. Yes, he's been injured, but he's a massive player for him.
Well, you could tell they struggled without him.
Definitely. And the fact that Bielsa used to sub him off if they were getting smashed to save him for the following week.
Save him for the next
they'll probably win. Conor Gallagher gets in because he's had an incredible season for Palace. I don't think many people expected him to be as good as he was, but he's been banging in the goals for them. My 5 more attacking midfielders, Phil Foden, is arguably the most skillful English player and the closest thing that we've got to Gaza, not just because of his hair, whereas I'd go with Grealish. He's more of a maverick than him, and Grealish gets in. Raheem Sterling has not had a bad season for Man City, contrary to what people
It's been getting better.
Yeah, he started quite well as well, I think, and then he had his dip. But he's always good for a goal. You can go with the whole England thing. He's never let them down. He's been phenomenal for England. Bukayo Saka, a young man who will have a point to prove because of the unnecessary abuse he got, regardless of whether it was racist or not. The abuse he got for missing a penalty was ridiculous and uncalled for.
Yep.
The last person, because I think he's had a great season, his name hasn't been mentioned, talked about him many times. Unfortunately, he's a bit of a left winger, so Sterling Saka would be more right wing for me. Grealish would be left wing. Foden would be centre. But this person isn't a starter at the moment, but he's done well for his club. He's been one of the danger men. Harvey Barnes gets that England squad for me.
Okay. that is an interesting shout in terms of...
He's a beast.
He is. Harvey Barnes of last season is absolutely smashing on that door. This season, I think because Leicester have struggled, he's struggled a bit more. But yeah,
I've just thought of somebody who I haven't even considered, and I'm a fucking knobhead. I haven't even considered Jarrod Bowen.
I have later on, so don't worry about that. I will give you the opportunity to talk about Jarrod Bowen later on, because I have a place for him. Is it in my squad? You got to keep listening, but he is on my list. Harvey Barnes, yep, top form Harvey Barnes, I think is in that bracket.
I'm swapping him.
Barnes. Man, we're having a live.
Barnes unfortunately doesn't make it. Bowen gets in. But I do think, you know what, I'd even consider Barnes in over Saka and shove Saka out.
Luckily, you get the opportunity to do it again in 6-7 months.
Yeah, no, fucking hell, Bowen. Yeah, Jarrod Bowen makes it. Harvey Barnes, yeah, I think he's done all right this season still.
He's done all right.
He hasn't hit the heights, but I think he's done better than the other ones that I've mentioned. He's head and shoulders above Rashford and Sancho and that.
Oh, yeah. In terms of... form this season. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of Rashford and Sancho, it's probably, unfortunately, for different reasons. If you're making a list of players in the worst form during the course of this season, they're probably both in troubling that top 5. I think, sadly, but
Yeah, Bowen makes it now. Sorry.
Now, Bowen is straight. I was considering Bowen for my attacking places,
okay,
and so. With that seamless link, because we largely have the same midfield, apart from kind of 3 for the price of 1 in terms of your last selection there. But speaking of 3, I've got 3 centre forwards in terms of the traditional sense of the word. I'm going to say, tempting fate. One of them is, you can talk about club form, you can talk about international form. One of the picks is so nailed on. It's kind of the nails have gone through the other side kind of the wall, and you got to
I'm glad you've finally seen the light with him.
Yeah, in terms of is close to Danny, kind of if you strain your ears a bit. Danny, Harry, for me, we've been teasing the other ones. I'm not even going to tease Harry Kane. He plays. I mean, I think in terms of if he's fit.
Yeah, Harry Kane's in mine as well.
Yeah, if he's fit, he's in the squad. If he's not fit, he's probably still maybe potentially in the squad.
He's not my captain this time, as I say. Declan Rice will be my captain, but Harry Kane is the best England striker we've had since Alan Shearer, and is he better than Shearer? No, I don't think so. Could he be better than Shearer? Yeah. Is he another one who needs to move away to become world class? If he can win the World Cup with England, he's world class. But until he wins a trophy, or start, really, he's not quite there just yet for me.
I mean,
he's on the cusp of it.
Yeah, I mean, tips. To disappoint you and upset you on air, I'd probably have him over Danny Ings, given the opportunity.
Well, I wouldn't, but there we go.
But we've given that one away almost as a freebie. So before we go for our final picks, I'm going to go for some who didn't make it for me. And again, in terms of the squad this time last year, before the Euros, maybe a different situation, and it could change in 6 months. For me, Patrick Bamford doesn't make the squad for me. He's unfortunately got injured at the worst possible time for Leeds. Also, for him in terms of he had that very good season last season. If he would have made the squad for the Euros, I don't think there could have been too many complaints. But
completely agree.
But he didn't, and he's kind of fallen to the back of the queue, unfortunately, and that's unfortunate in terms of a World Cup year.
If he can till the end of this season and the start of next season recapture half of the form that he had last year, does he have a chance, or does he make that squad, do you think?
I think he has a chance, simply because if we're playing the system that we assume we're going to play, basically with Kane as the fulcrum and two wide players, you can almost go for kind of a left field choice as your third striker in terms of who you go for, depending on if you want like a plan B and a plan C. So yeah, he certainly could be in the conversation if he starts scoring goals.
I mean, it's such a poor talent pool, isn't it, though, for strikers at the moment. At the current moment, based on form and things, it's so poor. It
is, but would you rather have a situation... We'll play devil's advocate here. At the moment, mentioned Harry Kane, he's miles above any other English striker, I think it's fair to say. Convenient for the way England play, where there's only a role for one striker. Yeah. So you have that situation compared to in our formative days of getting to know football. You mentioned Alan Shearer, that Euro 96 team. Sheringham up front. You had Les Ferdinand around at the time, Robbie Fowler, Stan Collymore. I mean, slightly not a centre forward, but Matt Letizia. You had plenty of players for like Robbie Fowler, for example, goal scoring record absolutely phenomenal. Barely played for England.
Andy Cole.
Yeah, Andy Cole, great goal scoring record at club level. Barely played for England. So there's like 4, 5, 6 quality strikers not getting even in the squad kind of in that time, let alone. Would you rather have a situation like that where you had so many players to choose from you couldn't possibly fit them all in? Or would you rather have our scenario whereby, because one is that much better than the others, you're almost kind of, oh, thank God, then I'm not having another centre-forward knocking on my door asking why he's not playing, because he'd be laughed out of the room because you just go Harry Kane.
No, you want the option of having a load of brilliant, informed centre-forward strikers so that it keeps the ones that get into the squad on their toes and it makes the ones that don't make it hungrier to get in. And then, if Harry Kane isn't doing it at the start of next season, don't put him in, put someone else in and make him know that, come on, Harry, you know how good you can be. Let's pick this up a bit and get him ready for the World Cup then, So, no, I'd always opt for having more choice and having to disappoint people than having to scrape the bottom of the barrel.
Yep. Also Ian Wright, another one. I mean,
Oh,
we
yeah.
were just kind of thinking about it, but it's just something how much quality it
Dion
was.
Dublin when he was at the Villa. That was a bit later, you know.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, a little easy one to lob over the net there. I do agree. You want more quality options than not. But in terms of players not in form and players in form, my final two under the bubble selections encapsulate those quite nicely. Player out of form because he was injured, but again, I think a player, if he was in form, like last season, would probably be in the squad, but as of today, if we're picking it, he wouldn't be. Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the closest kind of to a Harry Kane type player on his day, probably is Calvert-Lewin.
Yep.
But yeah, injured again during the course of this season, in a struggling team, I don't think he makes the squad for me. But the flip in terms of there's always a player who's in great form in the run-up to the tournament and doesn't get in. And if the World Cup's taking place in the summer, I think the player who would be fitting that category squarely is a player who you frantically rewrote your team sheet when you remembered him, Jarrod Bowen. For me, in terms of, this is the best season of his career, absolutely. No doubt about that. But yeah, it was close because, funnily enough, in terms of when I reveal my centre forwards, as I said, one is so clear cut, it's not even worth. I mean, we were lucky to get 2 minutes out of talking about Harry Kane. There's one who you go, okay, yeah, I can see that. And there was one who was, even when I was writing it down, I was like, he's not getting in my squad. Even when I wrote it down and I was looking at it, and I was like, wow. So for that third striker role, I mean, you had him in midfield. Bowen, he's the one who just missed out for me. But you mentioned in terms of the talent pool currently is not the most well stocked in the centre forward department. Are there any others who are in your bubbling under list, or have we gone under the sad state of English strikers?
Well, Harry Kane, as you say, makes it all day long. The two other players that have gone with it, looking at the stats and whatnot, I think when you look at it closely, you think, well, if it was tomorrow, then why not? Had injury not got in the way, I think that change of manager for his team would have been a massive help. And we mentioned on the last podcast that he wouldn't be a bad signing for a team if you've got 2 or 3 strikers, depending on how many you play up front. And that's Callum Wilson at Newcastle.
Okay, yep.
Unfortunately, injury has come at the wrong time. I think he would have started. He always looks dangerous. He always looks as though he can get a goal. So he doesn't quite make it. Calvert-Lewin doesn't make it for all of the reasons that you said, though I think when you're looking at form and how good a player can be, he's probably second choice behind Kane, or you'd think he would be. He would have been last year.
Yep.
Ollie Watkins doesn't make it for me, and that was a bit of a, does he not? Because Ollie Watkins has shown for England he can score goals, did against the Ivory Coast. He can play in a number of positions in that front three, though I think he only wants to play in one. Ollie Watkins is the type of striker who, if he's under pressure, is more likely to score. If someone's chasing him down or it's a harder chance. Look at his goals against Liverpool in the 7-2 win last year. His goals against Arsenal last year as well, and he's good at sniffing around that 2-yard out of goal sort of area and heading home. He doesn't quite make it for me. And then we move on to the 3 that have. So 4 letters, begins with an I. Do you want to say it for me?
Is he really in your World Cup squad?
4 letters, begins with an I. Do you want to say it for me, or are you going to let me say it?
I didn't realise Paul Ince had come out of retirement. Awobi's got 5, so you misspelled that.
He's also Nigerian.
Yep, so we're really scraping it. But no, I'm going to let you have your moment of glory.
Okay. So Ivan Toney makes it into my squad. Danny Ings doesn't make it. As much as I wanted to put Danny Ings in, and he was in it until about 2 hours ago, because I honestly don't think he's had the worst of seasons. I think, injuries haven't helped, changes of systems. I think next season we're going to see a different Danny Ings, and I really think he's going to do well for Villa. But Ivan Toney has had a good season. He's got about 12 goals, I think it is, in 17 to 20 games. He's a bit different to Kane in the way that he plays, but he's also quite similar. When he played for Brentford against us and we drew 1-1, he was very good at dropping off his striking colleague, like he's in a suit, dropping off, getting on the ball, laying it round. He seems to be revitalised in the Brentford team with Christian Eriksen in the side with him. He's a good penalty taker. We may get to penalties at some point. And he's a handful for players. And I think it just goes to show the test of character and the testament to him that he's come from Peterborough to Brentford to the England squad after being knocked back from Newcastle all those years ago. He makes it for me. And the other one, who hasn't scored as many goals as I thought he had, but a return of 15 isn't bad still.
Nope.
In a very difficult league to score goals, Tammy Abraham rounds off my three. So Kane, Abraham and Toney. I've got Bowen in the squad. I've probably got Barnes instead of Saka as well, let's be honest. Sterling, they can all play up front. We can go over false nine of Foden or Grealish. Kane, Abraham and Toney are going to be the three that I think get goals for us.
Abraham, I agree with you.
Yeah.
In terms of, he was the one in my rank order I put forward. The second one where you think, okay, yeah.
He's my second.
Once you thought about it, yeah, I mean, what he's done in Italy, fantastic. And I think in terms of, you can't, well, Southgate appears to be, but you can't ignore players who are playing well at top leagues outside of England.
Yeah.
So I mean, I didn't mention it when we were talking about midfielders, but I read somewhere that from some pundits saying don't take Bellingham. I'm like, that is one of the most... Considering this is a Villa podcast, and you kind of say, oh, you got to be biased against Blues players, but even if we were the most biased people ever, that was one of the most stupid things I ever read in terms of not taking Bellingham.
He's got to start.
I would start him as well. I agree. So
look at him against Rangers in the Europa League second leg. I didn't see the first leg, but I know he did very well there. That second leg, he was the only one wanting the ball at the end, trying to get that goal for Dortmund to get them back into the game and whatnot. Oh, ridiculous.
Yeah. So Abraham, in terms of, obviously we're a bit biased because he played with Villa, but if you're banging him in Italy, I think...
And he did well for Chelsea.
Yeah.
Didn't he? Before that, he did very well. He was very unfortunate when they decided to ship him out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a bold move to go to Roma. I think he's rebuilt his career. I think he's done really well. And, if you're banging in goals in Italy, I think you're good enough to be in the England squad, especially in a situation whereby we've just talked about...
He'll be back in the Premier League next year, though, I think.
I don't know. In terms of the running refrain through this... podcast, just
they're all joining us.
Yeah, but basically we realised we were recruiting for West Ham, so it's like now we've got to switch to another team in claret and blue. And speaking of claret and blue, my final selection is one. When you told me the concept of this show a couple of weeks before recording, nowhere near. As I said, when I wrote my squad down, still nowhere near, even though I wrote down my squad. And I've been thinking about it, and I'm like, He is still there, even though...
I'm trying to think of team. I can only think of Burnley and West Ham.
In terms of players we haven't recruited for?
No, in claret and blue. Oh, and the Villa, Danny Ings, but yeah.
Yeah, sadly not. Ings, I'd say...
Wally Hopkins.
Wally Hopkins makes my World Cup squad, and I wouldn't have thought of having him before, as I said, but international... I mean, he scored against the Ivory Coast. It hasn't elevated him up kind of...
Yeah.
In terms of quality, I thought it was crap. And I was, in the previous episode, talking about him potentially not being clinical enough for Villa. But in terms of England, he's not going to be first choice.
Yeah.
He's probably not going to be second choice in terms of that Harry Kane role. I mean, we've got Abraham in our squads as of now. Similarly, could be Calvert-Lewin if he's fit and firing and scoring goals. So he's not going to play that role. So somebody who can have those, I suppose, more old, you may even call them old-fashioned, just kind of run the channel, kind of we've got, especially kind of in the attacking positions we touched upon when talking about midfielders, we've got so much kind of potential game changers, game winners.
Yeah.
Just having someone a bit higher up the pitch who can just get the ball to somebody better. I mean, you mentioned Ivan Toney. I think that's a good shout, to be fair. And I suspect he's going to be the reverse, because I mentioned in terms of there's players who usually have a great run of form who don't make a squad if they play for what you may call more unfashionable clubs, because they have the illusion, rightly or wrongly, of that's a fluke. That's a one-off season.
Yeah.
Let's see how they do in the second season before I start, from an England perspective, thinking about picking them. But Tony gets to avoid that because, well, in terms of when we do this again in October, he avoids that because he gets a second shot. So he gets, if he's, in terms of October, say 10, 12 games gone in the Premier League season, if he's got 6 or 7 for Brentford, then I think the conversation becomes pretty real in terms of whether you take Tony. So I think he may be one of the players who actually might work out well in terms of this World Cup taking place later on in the year. But yeah, I mean, Wally Watkins. I just think in terms of the third player up front, he's not first choice. He's not going to be centre forward. I just think, maybe it was just me not paying full attention to our friendly and just maybe just seeing what he didn't score. But I think he can. You mentioned in terms of maybe plays well when the pressure's on. I almost think there's going to be no pressure on him at all if he's in this England squad. He'll come on for 10 minutes, maybe in a group stage game. But yeah, I think he can have a place. I mean, I am going to say now that if I was going to highlight a pick, which I may be changing in 6 months, this is probably near the top of the list.
If I had to choose between the two Villa strikers, and it's not just because I bum off him every single week, because I do, and we make light of it and whatnot, I would take Danny Ings. And
the obsession is real.
Yeah, it is, of course. The reason I would take Danny Ings, though, is that when you look at things, and I don't necessarily think you have to be playing against the top European clubs all the time and doing well and whatnot. Hence my Ivan Toney pick, hence my Kyle Walker-Peters pick, Conor Gallagher even. But, and I'm going to jinx it again, if I want somebody who is a renowned goal scorer, who has done it over a number of seasons, who, if you got a penalty, you'd feel confident that he'll score it. If he was in the penalty box, you'd feel confident he's at least going to hit the target and not put it wide. He's got more chance of scoring. I'd go with Ings over Watkins. But again, Abraham and Kane would be far above him. I'd have him more for that clinical prowess. Thinking, you're playing against Iran, you want to get a few goals, or you're playing against Scotland, you want to get a few goals at the end of it. Shove him on up front with Kane. They'll be intelligent with each other. He might get one. However, at the moment, Kane, Abraham and Toney make it for me.
Now, in terms of probably a pick you wouldn't have had before the start of this podcast, I've got more Villa players than you.
Wow, yeah, you have. It was very nearly 2 each. Yep. It was very nearly 3-2 to me because JJ was removed today as well. I think he was in my initial squad as well. But I think both squads, whichever one you took, you'd be thinking you're going to get deeper into the latter stages of the World Cup, or you'd hope to. But I think it's fair to say that whilst defence and midfield, we have an array of riches that we can, pull out and show to the rest of the world. It's the two bookend marks of the pitch in the penalty areas of striker and goalkeeper, where we don't really have that depth that we would like. Do we need it if Pickford is in his England form and Harry Kane is as good as he can be? Maybe not, but it only takes an injury for one of them, and then you're thinking, oh God, who are we going to put up front? And the chances are Raheem Sterling or Phil Foden will get put up front before any of the other attackers that we've mentioned. And goalkeeper-wise, well, it's anybody's guess who could be the second choice one.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, I agree, those positions are the most key in terms of crossing fingers, toes, everything else, hoping there's not an injury. Otherwise, there is going to be a real issue. I mean, in terms, in the group stage, you'd hope it wouldn't make a difference. I mean, in terms of draw predictors, I mean, we'll go into the full World Cup preview later on this year, but quarter-final currently looks like there's a strong chance you might be playing France. If both teams kind of go the way that they think they go, you need 100% fully fit team, I think, to beat France. So I think we'll come on to it a bit later, but
you need a different team to beat France.
Yes, Spain, maybe. But special bonus question for the fans, just to wrap up the show. We're playing Iran, USA.
Yeah.
The third choice team is still up in the air at time of recording. It will be determined by the time we do our World Cup previews later on in the year.
Yeah.
But as things currently stand, Wales, Scotland or the Ukraine. Scotland still have to play Ukraine in the semi-final game, and then the winner plays Wales. Who do you think's coming through that to take the final space in England's World Cup group?
Wales. I think. I don't think Ukraine are quite good enough. They're very hit and miss, aren't they? Under Shevchenko in the Euros, they'd have one good game, one bad game, one good game, one bad game, and their last bad game came against us, and we destroyed them. Let's be honest, it was a footballing masterclass at times against them, and it wasn't even our best performance, but it was good enough. Scotland, I'd love to see Scotland come and make it to the World Cup because of John McGinn as much as anything else, despite you loving John McGinn more than me. I think they've got some decent players as well. Andy Robertson, very good player. Billy Gilmore is going to be a great player in the future. But Wales, I feel, have just got players who have done it at a higher level, who are more world class than what Scotland have got. When you really look at Scotland, they've got one world class player, and that's Andy Robertson, who has won a number of trophies in very good leagues. I'm not going to count the Celtic players. I'm really sorry, Scottish fans. You're obviously doing very well to win the league there, and as are Rangers players, but Robertson is head and shoulders above everybody else for them. You look at Ramsey and Bale, and the fact that they sit at home for most of the season.
Yep.
When they play, they turn up for Wales and they do the business. Gareth Bale could drag Wales out of that group on his own if he wanted to, out of that World Cup group. And I think that they would cause us more of a problem than any other team. Scotland did great against us at Wembley, that 0-0. They did everything they needed to do against us. But I think Wales have got too much for the other two teams.
I think the fact that Wales have got home advantage in whoever they play in the final.
You wouldn't want to be playing against them at Cardiff, would you, or wherever it is there? Yeah,
I mean, I think time recording, I think it's going to be at Cardiff City Stadium. Yeah. But it could be in a Millennium if they wanted to switch that to get some more ticket
Play
sales.
Newport.
Man, that is
nice
a game.
And intimate.
Man, that is a game. Play at the Arms Park next door. But I think Wales will win. I agree with you in terms of Scotland or Ukraine. I think it'll be Wales-Scotland. But yeah,
yes.
I think Wales will go over the line. And I think, in terms of Wales in the World Cup, they would be, even though you could, in terms of quality players, name more Scottish players, I think, if you're going to do on the proverbial paper, as you just have there. That wild card in terms of Bale, because, that's all he's there for, really, to play for Wales now. I mean, in terms of he's not playing for Real Madrid anymore, probably won't be at Real Madrid by the time of the World Cup. I mean, there could be...
Joining West Ham.
Could have just a short-term deal just to get him through to the World Cup so he's fit. Burnley, keeping the claret and blue theme alive.
Bale will score against us in that World Cup. If Wales get there, Bale will score against us.
I mean, I think, from an England perspective, it's a very good group, but in terms of, you've got to hope or expect First 2 group games, got the job done. Nice game for the fans against what we are saying will be Wales. Hopefully we've done our business and then you can see it either way. And then we're looking forward to the knockout stages. But speaking of doing our business, we've just done it in terms of going through the England World Cup squad that we would pick as of today. We're going to do the same exercise again later on in the year, just before the World Cup squad is picked, and we're going to see how many players are the same, how many players aren't. Maybe we'll have a couple of guests to have their squads and they can argue or put forward their players who we've discarded already or for current purposes. Or everything could have become crystal clear by then and we each have the same squad because it's also obvious. But speaking of things that are crystal clear, you can go and check out our previous podcasts as well, where we have been keeping up to date with all things Villa, also our Premier League Predictor that went out a couple of weeks ago, transfer specials that we referred to, interviews with fans from other clubs, Villa fans kind of as well. We got it all covered. Go and check out our YouTube channel, Talk of the Trinity on YouTube. Check out our Twitter channel if you're thinking, I'd rather have some polls. You know, I'd rather have a go at picking my own England squad or seeing in a game of will they go to Villa or Burnley or West Ham, kind of which players from the claret and blue side win the rights to these England players we've been talking about. So that's on Twitter at Talk Trinity.
Yep.
Don't need the don't need the ver. Just straight in. Also, audio providers, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, Sabrina, Geezer, Deezer. Some of those are made up. And we're also on FanHub as well. But we will be back with you, depending when you listen to this actually, because you might be listening to this in June, kind of sipping a cocktail. So by then, the season will be over. So you won't be joining us again for our Leicester City preview. But if you are listening to these in logical order, we are going to be back ahead of the Leicester City game on the 23rd of April, or the weekend of the 23rd. We'll be giving our thoughts ahead of that game. Will Watkins and Ings still want to talk to each other after our World Cup squad shockers? Time will tell. But before I pass you over to Mr. Trinity himself for his final words, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. I mean, we enjoyed recording it. And, you know, there's going to be a debate about this all the way through to the World Cup start and probably after as well. But for now, thanks very much for listening and we'll see you again soon.
As it's an England special, we don't want to have any claret and blue bias here. We'll just mention Crystal Palace as well as a possible claret and blue destination, or Manchester City if you look at their claret away shirts sometimes.
Yep.
Or Barcelona, maybe, their money bags, well, a bit dodgy. We're not going to go any further onto that. But thank you for listening. Thank you for laughing at our picks. Thank you for going, yeah, speak some sense. Thank you for not turning off before the end. Thank you for subscribing. You can hit it. It's that little button in the corner of the page if you've got a smartphone. Otherwise, if you're listening to it on an old-fashioned Dell computer or your laptop, you've physically got to move your mouse and click on the subscribe button. If you're not following us on Twitter, then get following. As Baz says, there are lots of polls on there. There's our teams, there's opinions. You'll see people being divs towards us. You'll see people being nice towards us and going, I don't know what that div's talking about. But whatever you do, please don't tell Danny. And if you do, just say, Will says, Ings will only get better for you next season. And until then, I'm England till I die. I'm a bit more Villa till I die. I'm a lot more Villa till I die. Thank you for listening to Talk at the Trinity.